So recently there was a trend on X where people would take existing user interfaces, for example, the GitHub user interface, and pass it into GPT Image 2 or Nano Banana to have it be reimagined as if Blizzard Entertainment made it. If you don't know who Blizzard is, basically the company who made Diablo 2 and Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. Honestly, the user interfaces for Blizzard are always like some of the best. Like you just feel like you're there inside of the environment, inside the actual game itself. And it made me wonder, why don't we actually do this for web applications, right? Most of the web applications we use every day are literally just a bunch of rectangles with colored borders and some different background colors. And maybe if you have a little bit of hover state when you put your mouse over stuff. But nothing actually looks as good as this and as immersive as this. So one of the things I've been doing with Automaker is taking this approach, passing it into Image 2, having it rethink and redesign my UI to make it more space themey. And then I spent a bunch of time basically refactoring all the code to make it actually look that way. So I'll give you a demo real quick of what I built out, and I'll kind of walk you through the steps that I took to get the UI to look the way it does.
Welcome back, Commander.
So let me give a quick overview of the dashboard. This is where we have all the projects that you can kind of manage. You can also quickly pin them to the left, where you can then kind of navigate to them and open them up. We got terminals on the bottom over here. We have the ability to create a new Claude Code session and start actually running Claude Code instances on our code base. But one of the cool things I wanted to add in was the ability to retheme the application. So over here in the settings page, you can change the theme to, for example, we could do like a nice purple, or we could go back and do a lime colored. I put a lot of work in trying to make this feel like a more immersive Blizzard Entertainment user interface because it just makes it more enjoyable. Like I'm tired of just dealing with rectangles with colored backgrounds and borders. Like having some type of custom images and some custom buttons, I think could just take our user interfaces to the next level. And that's kind of what I've been doing on this application. So this is what the UI used to look like. You may argue that this is actually better than what I have now. It's a personal preference, honestly. I'm not going to please everybody, but I am building something fun for myself. And then I took that and I pasted it into ChatGPT. Can you please redesign this as if it's like a Blizzard Entertainment UI, user interface, based in a space age type of genre? Make sure that this entire application has like a shell that has kind of like a dashboard. Make sure it stays dark theme. So just something like that. And then I went ahead and just kicked that off. And Image 2 is honestly pretty amazing. Like this is going to go and generate an image for us that's going to be hopefully, have that nice little aesthetics that Blizzard likes to add to their dashboard. So while that's running in the background, this is a reference image of what I've been using to kind of redesign and retheme my entire mission control application. As you can tell, it looks really nice. It's really clean. It looks futuristic. I'm not 100% there. I did make some tweaks along the way, and some of the stuff is just very challenging to kind of do by hand. But overall, this is my reference image, and this is what we have now. I could probably change it back to the orange theme so we can kind of compare. Yeah, a little bit of differences, a little bit of tweaks here and there along the way as I decided that, some of the buttons could be simplified. But overall, that's kind of the approach. I took a screenshot of the image, I pasted it into ChatGPT, and it generated an image that kind of looks like this. So here's one example reference image. Now, honestly, you probably have to iterate on this a couple of times, and that's kind of what I did for my application until I got it to a place that looked a little bit better than this, a little bit more immersive, but not overly over the top like this. This is a little bit too much, right? Now, the next part of what I did was I basically took a screenshot of a button that I liked. So for example, I kind of like this button, or I like this panel. I took a screenshot. And I went to ChatGPT and I pasted in. Can you please convert this to a 9-slice image that I can use on a button or a panel? Make it just have a border. I don't know if this was my exact prompt, but something simple like this, basically so I can get an outline border that I can use on all my different panels of my application. And while this is running, we'll go back to my application over here, and we're going to go to the mission control, open up the public directory, and I'll show you some of the images that I have. Okay, so over here we have borders. And if I were to look at, let's see, panel focused, here's an example of what we're using for the panels. So we basically have a different color theme for all the panels and the buttons. So all the buttons have different, themes over here. Panels have different color themes. And then we also have the actual shell of the application. Okay, so that's basically what you're seeing over here. All those panels, and especially as I change the different colors, it's basically just loading in the different images and displaying them for the panels and the hover states and the buttons, right? Pretty simple. Now, for generating these, I actually have a script locally that I used GPT 5.5 to create. Basically, I told it to look at the base images. So I have like all these grayscale images, square PNG. I think there's like another one over here. But basically, I have a script that loads in the base images, and then it uses a overlay of a different color with a certain type of blend mode so that I can actually apply these dynamically. So in the future, if I were to add in more themes, all I have to do is run one script. It goes through and it regenerates all these images with the different color themes. And then I have that accessible directly in my settings page over here that they can switch to. Now, in terms of how I'm actually applying this to the buttons and to the borders, there is a CSS property for applying a border image. And I basically tell it to load in that square image. And it basically just applies the border to this. And then for inside of the panel, I basically told it to load in like a subset over here and just stretch it across the whole panel. Okay. Now going back to ChatGPT, this is the result. Again, I would say remove all text and make the image square. Okay, so now we have a square image. Now I do believe you have to make sure it's compliant with like a 9 slice. Maybe it doesn't matter at this point. This is a technique that you can do in games that basically have borders applied to buttons and panels and stuff. But as long as it's like a square and it's easily broken into 9 different cells, you can then kind of apply it to your panels very easily, and those will scale up for you. For example, if I were to go over here and scale this up and down, notice that like everything just still works, right? Honestly, that's all I had to do. And I basically just went through the UI and I made sure I had abstract components for the cards and abstract components for the buttons. So there's one place I can configure this. And then I hooked that into the state for the theme so I can easily just switch out the buttons when a user changes their theme state. Now, the last thing I'll kind of talk about is the intro, which I think is kind of cool to talk about. So let me just kind of do the intro real quick so you guys can see it.
Welcome back, Commander.
Okay, so as you can tell, you have the panel that shows up. We kind of do a slow zoom in, and then the panels open up from the center, and then there's a little bit of fog or like steam that kind of shows in the top and the bottom of the screen, and then we also have the AI voice in the background that says, "Welcome back, Commander." So how did I generate all those? Basically, what I did was, let's go to new chat. Image 2, again, is key. Let's go over here. I'm gonna grab shell. And then we're going to say, can you please use the reference image for like the theme? I want you to create blast doors that'll open up from the center. Now, sometimes you get lucky with the prompt, sometimes you don't. You have to keep on reprompting this over and over again until it works. But basically what this is doing behind the scenes in the actual application is that it's making 2 divs and it's applying that image directly in the center. It's splitting it and it's applying half the image to the left div, half the image to the right div. It's just doing a CSS transition to kind of open the doors from the center. And then also the steam, I don't know how that's working. I just asked ChatGPT 5.5 to add it in, and it's just basically some steam particles that show up. The zoom in, again, that's just basically doing a CSS transition over a certain time period, and then having that zoom into a certain stopping point, and then having like a timeline of when it kind of
Welcome back, Commander.
plays the sound and when it opens up. I had to spend some time kind of tweaking that to make it feel kind of nice. But overall, that's kind of how it works. Here's another example of the blast doors, but again, this isn't what I used. Now, another cool thing I did was I took this robot logo, which I've been kind of using for this mission control application. You can see that it kind of shows up in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and just like reprompt this again. Make sure that the blast doors are fully closed and that they are completely vertically split with no bevels. And then I want you to make it more rustic looking, and then apply this logo into the center of the blast doors that I'm attaching the flying robot, so that it seems like this robot has been pasted on the door for many, many years and it's rusted away. So these are basically the approaches I've been taking. It's just going back and forth with ChatGPT because Image 2 is honestly a really great image generation tool. I think it's better than Nano Banana at this point. And using that to build out UI components like button backgrounds, landing pages, all this other stuff, I think it's something that we should start trying to utilize, because I think having like a nice, well-made user interface, at least I think this is nice. You might look at this and think it's trash. I think this gives like a more immersive feel, and I kind of like it. Like, it'd be cool if all of our dev tools had this type of feel to it, but that's just my opinion. All right, let's go back to ChatGPT, and this is what you get. So basically, this is what I did. I took this image, and then I told it to split it down the center into 2 divs, and then just automatically open it up on a certain time period. Okay, so very, very simple stuff. And if you just think about how creative you can be using these tools, you can basically build anything now. It's pretty crazy, right? Anyway, that's all I wanted to kind of share with you all. Hope you guys learned something new from watching this, and you guys are also interested in building user interfaces that kind of look like this. I will say, if you're interested in using Mission Control to build out your next multi-million-dollar software application, go check out agentsystem.dev. I have a collection of skills I've been using every day to help build a professional quality software, but then also I'm having Mission Control bundle with those skills, which has been helping me manage all my different side projects, right? From a centralized place, it's a nice way to just quickly go to a project, manage it, kick off a prompt, and then go back to a different one. I find this to be very, very nice. And then also just adding the cool aesthetics that make it all space theme. So go join the waitlist. When this is ready, I'll release it. I will have a mission control light version, which is free for people to play around with. But again, I'm not going to release this until I feel like it's bug free. Right now, there's some issues on Windows and a couple of issues with the Claude Code terminal not updating state properly in the sessions cards. I got distracted kind of redoing the UI, but I think this is going to be a really cool application you guys can play around with. Join the waitlist if you guys are interested. Have a good day and happy coding.